The series begins with a girl named Selena Kyle, who steals something and runs to a quiet street. When she sees Thomas, Martha, and Bruce Wayne walking by, she hides. Suddenly, a masked man shows up and demands money from the Waynes. He shoots Thomas and Martha, but misses Bruce, leaving him all alone. Meanwhile, at the Gotham police station, there's a hostage situation. And Jim, a new officer, tries to calm the situation and manages to stop the person without hurting them. At that time, Harvey, Jim's senior partner, gets mad because he thinks Jim should have shot the person right away. Jim explains that shooting could have hurt other people. Later, Jim and Harvey get a call about 2 people being killed in the theater district. When they get there, Jim finds Bruce, who is still in shock. At that moment, Harvey is scared because the victims were important people in Gotham. But since Jim already spoke to the witness, Harvey has to handle the case. Soon after, Jim tells Bruce that when he was younger, a drunk driver crashed into his car and killed his father, so he understands how Bruce feels. Jim promises that even though the world can be dark and scary, there is always light. Bruce then describes the man who hurt his family. He says the man was tall and wore a black mask, hat, gloves, and shiny shoes. The man took his father's wallet and his mother's necklace before shooting them. Jim tells Bruce to stay strong and promises to find the man responsible. Alfred came to pick up Bruce, and Jim introduced himself. After that, Harvey told Jim not to talk to the witness without his permission because they were now dealing with a big problem. Soon, Montoya and Allen, 2 officers from the Central Police, arrived to ask about the Wayne case. However, Jim didn't want to just hand over the case, and Harvey also didn't like how arrogant the 2 officers seemed. The next day, Captain Essen of the Gotham Police ordered Jim and Harvey to solve the case quickly. Harvey asked Jim to leave the team because he wasn't happy working with him, but Essen refused. She reminded Harvey that Jim was a war hero and that Jim's father was an important person in the past. In the end, Harvey told Jim that he should leave the city because Gotham wasn't a place for a good person like him, but Jim refused. They continued looking for the criminal, but unfortunately, didn't find any leads. Later, Nigma, an officer who loves puzzles, explained about the bullet that was taken from Thomas Wayne's chest. It came from a gun that wasn't in the police records. Jim started thinking that the criminal wasn't just a random person from the streets. It could be a hitman or someone who had a personal problem with the Wayne family. Then, they went to see a mafia boss named Fish Mooney, who worked with Carmine Falcone. She was in the back beating up someone with Penguin, her servant, watching. After introducing himself, Jim heard the noise from the back and asked what was going on. Fish said one of her workers had stolen her money, so she was teaching him a lesson. Shortly after, Jim went to the back and saw Penguin hitting the man. He told them to stop. After work, Jim goes to visit his friend Barbara, and she is happy to see him wearing a suit instead of his regular police uniform. There, he tells her about the case he's struggling with. He had promised Bruce to solve it, but now he feels like he can't keep that promise. Barbara, however, is confident that Jim will eventually catch the criminal. Later, Harvey calls Jim, telling him that Fish Mooney got some information from her people. There's a man trying to sell a pearl necklace, and his name is Mario Pepper. Soon after, Jim and Harvey go to Mario's house, where they meet a girl named Ivy who loves plants. There, Jim and Harvey ask Mario where he was when the Wayne murders happened. Mario says he was home with his family. But when they want to check inside the house, Mario suddenly runs away. Jim chases after him, and they end up fighting. When Jim has trouble handling Mario, Harvey steps in and shoots him. Afterward, the police search Mario Pepper's house and find a pearl necklace that seems to belong to Martha Wayne. Jim and Harvey are congratulated by their co-workers for solving the case. Meanwhile, Penguin talks to Montoya and Allen. He tells them that Mario Pepper was actually framed by Fish Mooney and the police. Penguin says he saw Fish with the necklace and heard her planning how to plant it in Mario's house. This happened after Jim and Harvey visited Fish. Penguin says he reported this because he felt bad for Bruce, who lost his parents. Of course, Penguin also wanted to get rid of Fish Mooney for his own reasons. The next day, Bruce Wayne held the funeral for his parents, and not far away, Selena saw him from a distance. After the funeral, Bruce thanked Jim for keeping his promise. On the other hand, Montoya went to see Barbara, who she used to have a relationship with. Barbara told her that she's now with Jim Gordon. Montoya came to tell Barbara that the Gotham police, including Jim, had framed Mario Pepper. Upon hearing that, Barbara didn't believe her because she knew Jim as the most honest person. After Montoya left, Barbara asked Jim about the accusation. Jim, of course, denied it. The next day, Jim met Montoya to ask for proof of what she said. Jim promised that if Mario Pepper was truly framed, he would find out himself. He then went to Mario's house to check his shoes. After checking, Jim told Harvey that he believed Fish Mooney might have set everything up to protect the real criminal because she works with Falcone. Harvey thought Jim was out of his mind. Jim explained that he learned from Montoya about the setup and also noticed there were no shiny shoes at Mario's house like Bruce had described. Harvey then reminded Jim that they had already killed Mario and exposing the truth could cost them their jobs. The case was closed, and Harvey told Jim to let it go. Still curious, Jim decided to confront Fish Mooney to ask what she and Harvey talked about before. But Fish refused to speak, and Jim ended up fighting Fish's men. Unfortunately, Fish hit Jim from behind, and he was taken away. Soon after, Harvey came looking for Jim because Barbara had told him about the situation. Harvey tried to make a deal with Fish, who was busy watching stand-up comedy when Harvey contacted her. There, Harvey warned her that some of her people had leaked information about the setup, and he threatened Fish if anything happened to Jim. But sadly, Harvey ended up in the same trouble as Jim. Shortly after, Fish tells Penguin that Falcone is getting old and it's time for someone to take over, and she thinks that person should be her. However, Fish knows that Penguin has betrayed her by telling the Central Police. Penguin tries to deny it and says he's loyal, but Fish doesn't believe him anymore and starts beating him up. Meanwhile, Falcone and some armed men arrive and shoot Fish's men, but leave one alive to send a message to Fish, telling her to ask for permission before taking any action. Falcone then releases Harvey and Jim. He's happy to finally meet Jim because he knew Jim's father, who was one of the best people in the city. That's why he decides to let Jim go. Jim knows that Falcone controls the Gotham police and even the mayor. Jim also suspects that Falcone might have been the one who killed the Waynes, and he's curious about how Fish got Martha's pearl necklace. Falcone tells him the necklace is just a replica and that he doesn't know who really killed the Waynes. Then, Falcone explains that Mario Pepper was sacrificed on purpose, so the people of Gotham would believe that justice was being served quickly, making them feel safe. He also tells Jim that he's stubborn like his father and warns him not to be too proud or think he's always right. Falcone says that trying to take down the city's government and police wouldn't make things better. After that, Harvey takes Jim to the docks and tells him to kill Penguin on Falcone's orders. If Jim refuses, someone else will do it, and they might go after Jim and his loved ones. Harvey once again urges Jim to do it. At that time, Penguin begs for his life, promising to obey Jim's every command and be his servant for life. Penguin also warns that a war is coming because Falcone is losing his power and his rivals are ready to fight. He offers to help Jim by becoming a spy. He tells Penguin not to return to Gotham, and instead of shooting him, Jim lets Penguin go. After that, Jim went to Wayne Manor and saw Bruce standing on the roof, looking like he was going to jump. Soon after, Bruce explained that he wasn't trying to hurt himself, but just wanted to learn how to conquer his fear. Jim then told Bruce that Mario Pepper wasn't the real criminal because the police and the mafia had framed him. Bruce was glad the real culprit was still out there and said he wanted to find them. Afterward, Jim asked Bruce for a second chance to catch the real criminal and to clean up the police force. He asked Bruce to keep this a secret, and Bruce agreed, giving Jim back his police badge. At the end, Penguin manages to escape and starts getting angry. In another part of the story, Bruce is seen trying to hurt himself, but Alfred scolds him for doing something so dangerous. Meanwhile, Selena and some street kids are approached by two strangers who say they're doing a homeless outreach project. They give the kids food, but then a woman named Patty injects something into them. At that time, some of the kids, including Selena, manage to escape. The next day, a homeless man who used to be a police officer is found dead after being shot by Patty's partner, Doe. Jim is upset because no officers were around when it happened. Another officer explained that they were at a restaurant and they had arrested a homeless teen. Jim thought the teen might know something about the murder, so he questioned him. The boy said 2 people came and tried to force them to get injected, and then one of them shot the police veteran. The boy and another kid ran away and ended up at the restaurant. The boy also explained that this wasn't the first time kids from the streets had gone missing, cause it had been happening for weeks. But Harvey didn't believe him and accused the boy of killing the police veteran. And Jim, trying to calm Harvey down, reminded him to follow the rules. Harvey was surprised, saying Jim shouldn't care about the rules after what he did to Penguin. Jim didn't care about Harvey's comments, believing he had done the right thing. Meanwhile, Penguin, who was hitchhiking, looked rough, as if he had just come back from the dead. He realized he had made mistakes, but he promised himself that he would return stronger and smarter. When one of the guys giving him a ride teased him about walking like a penguin, Penguin got angry and stabbed the guy with a broken bottle. Back at the station, Essen warned Jim that Gotham was a tough place. She said if Jim stuck too much to his principles, it would destroy him. Jim understood and reported that someone was kidnapping street kids by offering them food and drugging them. But then, Harvey wondered why anyone would target street kids and who was behind it. Not long after, Nigma showed up with results from a blood test he had done on the homeless teen. He found a lot of ADP in the boy's body, which is a substance often used in Arkham Asylum. Then, Essen told them to keep this information quiet and not let the press know, as it could cause panic. The following day, Falcone visits Fish and tells her that he had spoken with Penguin. He also talks about how the deaths of Bruce Wayne's parents will cause problems for Gotham. Before, the Wayne and Falcone families were the pillars of the city, but now that the Waynes are gone, everything is off balance. The Wayne family is in a weak position, and the Maroni family is taking advantage of this. Falcone isn't worried about his enemies, but more about his friends. He asks Fish if it's true that she said Falcone is old, weak, and ready to be replaced. Fish denies it, saying she has love and respect for him, and even considers him like a father. There, Falcone is pleased to hear this and asks her to forget the rumors. He then calls a servant and asks him to take care of Fish, saying she's important to him. However, the servant gets beaten up by Falcone's men as a warning, in case Fish isn't telling the truth. After Falcone leaves, Fish realizes she needs more money, territory, and people. For now, she'll pretend to be loyal and wait for the right moment. Meanwhile, Montoya and Alan visit Penguin's mother to ask if anyone might want to harm her son. She tells them that a woman dressed up had taken Penguin. At the same time, Penguin is driving the young man's car and rents a small caravan while spying on the Wayne and Falcone families. Soon, the phone of the young man whose car he took rings. It's the man's mother calling. Penguin tries to ask for ransom, but the woman doesn't believe him. Soon after, Jim and his partner go to see Fish to ask her about 2 kidnappers who are targeting street kids. There, Fish is surprised to hear that Jim was able to kill Penguin since Jim is known for being an honest person. Fish then tells them that she only knew about buyers interested in pretty girls, but now there's a new buyer from overseas who wants all kinds of kids. That night, Jim talks to Barbara about the case. Right now, they have no solid leads and are not allowed to speak to the press. Barbara mentions that newspapers usually get their stories from anonymous sources, and she's willing to help with that. Jim reminds her that whatever they talk about should stay between them. The next day, Essen is furious when a story about the case appears in the newspaper. She demands to know who leaked the information, but no one admits it. Meanwhile, Jim gets a lead on the supplier of ADP, a chemical that requires special permission to purchase. He calls a judge to get a warrant. Meanwhile, the ADP supplier, Gray, is upset because the police are now investigating him. He demands more money from Patty to bribe the police, but Patty refuses, saying they already had an agreement. They need to make their delivery, and Patty warns that the doll maker, who is their boss, doesn't like failure. That's why they need to keep kidnapping children. Shortly after, Jim and Harvey arrive at Gray's place to investigate. Before going inside, Harvey tells Jim that Barbara is the one who leaked the story to the newspaper. Harvey suggests Jim learn how to control his partner, but Jim says he trusts Barbara more than anyone else. They go inside and meet Gray. At first, Gray admits he used to store ADP, but stopped after Arkham was closed. He tries to secretly warn them that someone dangerous is nearby. Suddenly, Patty turns off the lights and starts shooting at the police, managing to escape. Afterward, Jim finds the room where the kidnapped street kids are being held and successfully rescues them. On the other hand, the mayor praised the police for rescuing the kidnapped children. He promised to create a program to help the kids by sending them to a juvenile detention center under the Child Protection Department's care. But Jim didn't agree with this plan, feeling it was wrong to send the kids to detention without a trial just to make the mayor look good. Soon after, Alfred came to see Jim and invited him to visit Wayne Manor. Meanwhile, the rescued kids, including Selena, were being registered. Selena thought something was wrong and wanted to speak with Jim, but her request was denied. When she got on the bus and saw Patty, Selena realized she needed to escape, but unfortunately, she failed. The mayor was furious because the bus full of children was taken by the kidnappers, who turned out to be Patty and her team. Shortly after, Jim and Harvey interrogated Gray, and he mentioned a truck with a logo showing a blue plate and a silver fork. Meanwhile, the kidnapped kids were taken to a location where they were about to be locked in containers. During the head count, Patty realized Selena was missing. Luckily, Selena had hidden and was able to escape. After that, Jim returned to Harvey and Essen, and though they couldn't figure out the meaning of the logo Gray mentioned, Jim quickly realized it was actually the Trident logo. At the container site, one of Patty's men showed up with a scratch on his eye from Selena. There, Patty searched around and found Selena hiding on top of a box. Just then, Jim arrived and knocked Patty out before she could shoot. Harvey also caught Doe, one of Patty's men. Together, they stopped Patty's plan and saved the children. Sometime later, Jim visits Wayne Manor and hears from Alfred about Bruce. Alfred shares that Bruce has been having nightmares and sometimes hurts himself. Alfred explains that he was asked by Thomas to take care of Bruce, so he lets Bruce make his own choices. Bruce thinks he's doing fine and doesn't need advice. Jim understands that Bruce has been through something terrible and believes that talking to others can help. There, Bruce respects Jim and has been following his work in the newspaper, so he decides to donate money to help the street kids. But Jim explains that's not how things work. The next day, at the police station, Selena disagrees with sending the street kids to the juvenile detention center. The officers tell her they don't want the kids to end up back on the streets. However, Selena insists on talking to Jim and says she'll scream if she doesn't. Soon, Jim arrives, and Selena tells him she has something important. She's been watching him and Bruce, and she reveals that she actually saw the real killers of Bruce's parents. Later, Penguin is happy to return to Gotham. At the same time, there's a strange incident where a balloon seller ties a con man's hands and lets him float into the air. Not long after, Jim and Harvey arrive at the scene. They find out the victim, Ronald Danger, had scammed many people in Gotham. Harvey comments that the man deserved it. Afterward, Jim meets with Lieutenant Bill Cranston, who proudly shows off an award he received from the Gotham Business Association for his service. Jim then returns to the balloon seller case, but Harvey doesn't want to arrest the person, saying justice has already been served. Not long after, Davies Lemon from Child Protection brings Selena to Jim because she has information that could help with his investigation. Soon after, Selena asked why Jim cared so much about the Wayne murders. Jim explained that the person responsible needed to be punished and justice had to be done. Selena then showed him the spot where the man took Bruce's parents' wallet and necklace. She claimed to have seen part of the killer's face, but Jim doubted it since it was dark at the time. Selena also said she had stolen a wallet before the incident and thrown it into a gutter. After checking, Jim found the wallet and handcuffed Selena so she couldn't escape. But Selena managed to free herself with a pen she had stolen. Meanwhile, Montoya and Allen went to visit Fish, asking about Penguin. They wanted to know if he was really killed for snitching on them. Fish confirmed it, but said it wasn't her who did it because it was Jim, following Falcone's orders. There, Allen suspected that Fish had snitched on Falcone because she wanted revenge for her men who were beaten up. At Wayne Manor, Alfred and Bruce were practicing sword fighting, and Bruce seemed to enjoy it. Alfred thought this was better than Bruce staring at his parents' case files all day. But Bruce said he was looking for clues about their murder. Then, Alfred reminded him that Jim had promised to find the killer, but Bruce wasn't so sure. Later, Jim reported that Selena had escaped. Montoya and Allen then visited him, asking about Penguin's murder. Jim defended himself, saying he didn't kill Penguin. He told Harvey about it, but Harvey said it wasn't a big deal and Jim had done what he was supposed to. Harvey also told Montoya to drop the matter. Later, Jim and Harvey question a man who claims to be a balloon maker. He tells them that his former employee, Carl Smackers, stole 4 of his balloons. Meanwhile, one of Fish's men is shocked to see Penguin alive and tries to take him to Fish, but Penguin stabs him and escapes. A little later, Penguin goes to a restaurant to ask for a job, but gets turned down because he's not wearing shoes. Frustrated, he follows a restaurant worker to steal his shoes. On the other side of town, Lieutenant Bill Cranston beats up someone for not paying him money. Soon, a person known as the Balloon Man shows up and tries to tie him up with a balloon. At that time, Bill fights back, but the Balloon Man still manages to tie him to a balloon, and Bill floats into the sky. The next morning, Bruce reads the newspaper about the Balloon Man who is targeting corrupt people, including dirty cops. This makes Alfred worried. Barbara is also concerned about Jim's safety because of the Balloon Man. She notices that something is troubling Jim. Jim explains that when the Balloon Man's first victim, a scammer, was killed, no one cared. But when the second victim, a police officer, was targeted, there was a big investigation. At that time, Barbara suggests that maybe the police are trying to restore trust with the public. However, many people in Gotham seem to support the Balloon Man, which makes Essen upset, especially since the Balloon Man is now targeting police officers like Lieutenant Bill Cranston. Then, Jim gives an update on the Balloon Man case, and they're looking for a man named Carl, a former employee at a balloon factory. Turns out, Carl stole 4 balloons, and with 2 already used, there are 2 more targets. Jim suspects the targets might be important public figures or corrupt cops. Shortly after, Jim and Harvey go around Gotham to ask people for information, but Harvey doesn't seem to be taking it seriously. They eventually find a place where Carl Smackers might be hiding. When they arrive, Carl tries to run, but Jim catches him. There, Carl admits he didn't kill anyone cause he only stole the balloons because he owed money to a loan shark. He sold the balloons to someone he never met, using a secret location to exchange the balloon for cash. Harvey thinks Carl is clever because the evidence, which is the balloon, will disappear once it floats away. However, Carl tells Jim and Harvey that the bodies attached to the balloons will come back down. As the balloons rise, they get cold and eventually burst, causing the bodies to fall back to the ground. Just then, the body of the first victim falls back into Gotham City. Soon after, Jim and Harvey rush to the scene and figure out the next target, Cardinal Queen. They also find a form in the victim's pocket with Jim's name on it, making Jim realize who the real criminal is. Meanwhile, Fish's henchman named Lasno is worried that Falcone might want to hurt him. But he's reminded that Falcone is actually after Fish, not him. Fish then orders her other men to target a girl Falcone often spends time with. On the other hand, Barbara is shocked when Montoya enters her home without permission. Montoya tells her that Jim killed someone on Falcone's orders. She tries to convince Barbara that she's telling the truth. Barbara, however, thinks Montoya is just upset because Barbara chose Jim over her. Montoya admits she still cares for Barbara and believes she deserves better. Meanwhile, Penguin successfully gets a job at a restaurant. The manager warns him not to see or hear anything. At that time, Penguin sees this as a big opportunity. When Maroni comes in, Penguin overhears him talking about Falcone, saying he's the top boss in Gotham, but that Arkham's problems might change things. Maroni notices Penguin is new and gives him some money, encouraging him to work hard since he's been through tough times too. Later, the news reports that Balloon Man has struck again, and this time, the victim is Cardinal Queen, who was accused of molestation. Jim realizes that Davies Lemon is the Balloon Man. He figured it out because a form Jim gave Davies was found with the victim's body. Jim explains that Davies worked for child protection for 15 years. At that time, Davies' co-workers described him as wise and dedicated, but Essen is angry because his actions are making the mayor and other officials scared, forcing them to hide at home. Then, Jim quickly spreads Davies' photo, confident they'll find him soon. Harvey suggests that Davies might be hiding balloons, helium tanks, and carts in a warehouse. Suddenly, Jim remembers Selena mentioning a new child protection warehouse, so he suspects that might be where Davies is hiding. Unexpectedly, when they checked the warehouse, they found one balloon left. Without wasting time, Jim and Harvey went inside, but Davies held Harvey at gunpoint. Davies told Jim that they were alike and that Jim should support him. Davies explained that he had dedicated his life to helping street kids, but nothing ever changed because Gotham's leaders and police didn't care about protecting them. That's why Davies decided to take matters into his own hands. When Davies tried to shoot, Harvey stopped him and tied him to a balloon. Jim grabbed onto Davies and floated up with him, but Harvey had no choice but to shoot the balloon to bring them back down. Afterward, Davies told Jim that there would always be people who think like him. Meanwhile, Bruce, watching the news about Davies' arrest as Balloon Man, believed that Davies was no different from a criminal. The next day, Fish was surprised when Falcone visited her. She asked why Falcone's girl, Natalia, didn't come, and Falcone explained that Natalia had been attacked. Fish commented that Gotham had become even crazier since the Wayne incident. At that time, Falcone promised to find out who hurt Natalia and who helped her. He also talked about Arkham and how Maroni could become a threat. At the end, Jim goes to Barbara's apartment. He tells her that the city is in trouble because when he asked Balloon Man who the next target was, Balloon Man said it didn't matter cause everyone in power was guilty. Jim feels like he's failing the people of Gotham. If people keep taking the law into their own hands, there will be no more law. Suddenly, someone knocks on Barbara's door, and it's Penguin. Soon after, Penguin showed up at Barbara's apartment to meet Jim. Naturally, Jim was shocked and angry to see him. In the past, Jim had told Penguin not to return to Gotham, but Penguin didn't listen. Now, Jim regrets not killing Penguin when he had the chance, worried that Falcone will find out he's still alive. But there, Penguin tries to convince Jim that he's a good person and will help him. He explains that this is all connected to Fish Mooney, Falcone, the police, and even Harvey, who is hiding something from Jim. Penguin also reminds Jim that a war is coming, and if Jim wants to save Gotham, he can help by acting as a secret agent. This ties into the ongoing Arkham issue. Meanwhile, a man approached Councilman Jenkins, claiming to be one of the people who voted for him. Suddenly, the man assembled a weapon and stabbed Jenkins and another person. Essen quickly got the news and assigned the case to Jim and Harvey. Unofficial reports suggested the victims were robbed, as their wallets and jewelry were missing. Jim and Harvey then questioned a parking lot attendant near the scene, finding a knife in his backpack. But the young man insisted he didn't do it, and Jim believed him. Jim soon discovered evidence, a proposal for developing 16 hectares of the Arkham area. Before their deaths, Thomas and Martha Wayne had plans to clear out the slums in Arkham and build affordable housing for Gotham's people. They also planned to rebuild Arkham Mental Hospital into a modern mental health facility, with support from the mayor. At Fish's bar, a girl auditioned to sing. But Fish wasn't just looking for singing talent cause she wanted more. She asked the girl to try seducing her, but it didn't go as Fish had hoped. Fish then revealed that she wasn't really looking for a girl, but for a weapon. Meanwhile, Maroni arrived at his restaurant to celebrate gaining control of new territory in the Arkham area. At Wayne Manor, Jim asks Bruce about the Wayne family's plans for Arkham. There, Alfred explains that the plan is mostly forgotten now. After Thomas and Martha Wayne died, Falcone stepped in to support the project, but made changes. At that time, Jenkins used to support Falcone, but now he's dead, likely because of a plan by Falcone's rival, Maroni. So, the new Arkham Asylum was meant to help the people of Gotham, especially those with mental illnesses who can't afford care. Bruce doesn't want his parents' dreams to die with them. There, Jim realizes that this isn't just about Arkham, cause it could lead to a gang war between Falcone and Maroni. Soon after, Jim gets a call from Harvey saying that council member Zeller, who worked for Maroni, has been kidnapped. Zeller was taken to Arkham by the same person who killed Jenkins. The kidnapper says he was hired to send a message by burning Zeller. The next day, the police investigate the scene, and Jim explains that this is part of the territorial conflict between Falcone and Maroni. Harvey is surprised that Jim seems to know so much about the situation. Later, Nigma arrives with the autopsy result for Jenkins and his aide. Both were killed by being stabbed through the eye socket with a sharpened metal rod, the same weapon used on Zeller. Jim and Harvey then go to find a hitman. They are told the killer's name is Gladwell, a professional hitman who works in the Lansky building. When Gladwell realizes the police are after him, he hides and prepares his gun. Harvey calls Jim after finding an article about Jenkins and Zeller, confirming that Gladwell is the killer. They also find a paper with the initials CLM dropped by a woman who had just left the warehouse. On the other hand, Bruce wakes up from a nightmare and asks Alfred to find more files about Arkham. Alfred thinks the files contain terrible secrets, but Bruce insists on seeing them. Meanwhile, Penguin gets caught by the restaurant manager for spying on people counting money in the back. Soon after, a masked gang attacks Maroney's restaurant, robbing the place and shooting people, including the manager. When Maroney's men check the back, they find the money is missing. However, Penguin manages to save some of the money in the kitchen. Maroney is furious and suspects Falcone is behind the robbery. He orders his right-hand man, Frankie, to take revenge. Penguin, for saving the money, is promoted to manager of the restaurant. Meanwhile, Jim comes home earlier than usual. Barbara feels that Jim is hiding something and asks him about Oswald, also known as Penguin. Jim is surprised that Barbara knows the name and suspects Montoya told her. He also questions Barbara's relationship with Montoya, since she often sees her. Barbara explains that before she was with Jim, she was in a relationship with Montoya for a year. The next day, Harvey tells Jim that the real Gladwell died 5 years ago, and the killer has been using his identity to hide and work. All his records, from employee files to contact info, are fake. Jim believes the only clue they have is the paper with CLM written on it. They need to catch the killer before the Arkham vote, or it could trigger a gang war. Meanwhile, Fish watches a girl named Liza Singh again and asks her to try to seduce her. This time, Liza does exactly what Fish Mooney expected. Later, Harvey goes alone to meet Fish to ask about Gladwell. Fish says it's a waste of time because Falcone will soon replace Gladwell since Falcone is old and weak. Harvey notices Fish seems happy and confident about Falcone's downfall, but he warns her that if Falcone falls, she might fall too. Fish isn't worried and tells Harvey that she already has a backup plan. In another scene, Penguin contacts Jim to prove he can be trusted. Penguin explains that Maroney has sent his men to target someone who supports Falcone's plan. Soon after, Jim checks the list of police officers on duty and realizes that the initials CLM match the 3 officers guarding the mayor. Then, Jim rushes to the mayor's house and tells him to leave because the police aren't guarding him anymore. As the mayor packs his things, Gladwell waits outside, preparing his weapon. When Jim opens the door, he comes face to face with Gladwell and quickly runs with the mayor to escape. Shortly after, Gladwell follows them, picking up Jim's drop gun. Suddenly, Jim and Gladwell get into a fight until Harvey arrives and shoots Gladwell, stopping him from completing his job. Later, Barbara comes to Jim's office to apologize for not telling him about her past relationship with Montoya. She says she doesn't want any secrets between them. Barbara also asks Jim again about who Oswald or Penguin is. Jim is surprised that she's still focused on this and regrets discussing work with her. Barbara then tells Jim he has to make a choice. Either share things with her or let her go. Elsewhere, Fish makes 2 girls fight because she only needs one and Liza wins the fight. The next day, the vote on Arkham is finished. The decision is that the Arkham area will be developed into both low-cost housing and a waste disposal site. The mayor says this is the best way to combine both plans. Maroney is happy because he's been fighting for this for years. Meanwhile, Arkham Asylum will be repaired and reopened. The mayor believes that if Thomas and Martha Wayne were alive, they would be proud of what has been accomplished. On the other hand, Jim explains to Bruce that the mayor was threatened by Maroney. That's why the mayor gave Maroney the area for waste disposal, while Falcone got a share to build cheap housing. Bruce is disappointed because his parents believe the new mental hospital would bring hope to Gotham, but now that hope seems lost. The following day, Penguin meets the 3 men who robbed Maroney's money for him. Since they succeeded, Penguin gives them food as a reward, but the food is poisoned. After they die, Penguin takes all the money and leaves. Later, Bruce is busy when Alfred comes to take him for a walk. Bruce is confused about what's happening in Gotham. He wonders how Falcone and Maroni can divide the Arkham territory, while Wayne Enterprises does nothing to stop it. Elsewhere, Maroni is excited because he won part of Arkham and managed to scare the mayor. Now, he's ready to rob Falcone's casino. Frankie advises him not to cause trouble with Falcone, but Maroni insists on doing it to show Falcone that he won't be underestimated anymore. Then, a mysterious man approached a street performer and secretly placed a small bottle with green liquid next to him. Curious, the performer smelled it and suddenly felt incredibly strong. He went into a store, drank cold milk, and refused to pay, showing off his new strength. Meanwhile, Jim and Harvey were getting lunch when they saw Selena stealing someone's wallet. As they were about to chase her, they heard an alarm from a nearby store and decided to check it out. The store owner reported that a busker was drinking all the milk and had even stolen an ATM machine with his bare hands. Shortly after, Jim and Harvey reported the incident to Essen and managed to find the mysterious bottle that might be connected to the busker's strange powers. Elsewhere, Liza was bored with her music lessons, but Fish insisted that Liza was her secret weapon and needed to do exactly as she was told. Later, Fish attended a meeting with Falcone. Falcone admitted that many people were unhappy, but he assured everyone that they would get their share of the Arkham project. Seeing Maroni acting confident made Falcone's partner, Nikolai, angry, and he suggested they teach Maroni a lesson. However, Falcone disagreed, saying he wanted Maroni to think he was winning. Fish defended Falcone, and the two men started arguing. Then, Jim and Harvey start asking people about the busker, and someone recognizes him as Benny. After that, they go to the place where Benny usually sleeps. There, Benny tells them he needs more of the medicine from a man with a broken ear. When Jim and Harvey try to arrest him, Benny throws them aside and lifts an ATM machine with ease. But suddenly, his bones become weak, and he dies when the machine falls on him. Meanwhile, the mysterious man continues giving bottles of green liquid to people on the streets. At Wayne Manor, Alfred is frustrated by the mess in the house. He tells Bruce that Wayne Enterprises is hosting a charity event, and he signed Bruce up to attend. Bruce agrees to go because he wants to ask the board of directors about Arkham and if the Mafia got their share of Arkham from Wayne Enterprises. Later, the news reports that a dangerous drug called Viper is spreading in Gotham. This drug gives people incredible strength, but it only lasts a few hours. At the police department, Nigma becomes interested in the Viper cases. He explains that the drug burns calcium from the bones for energy, making users crave milk and cheese. Eventually, their bones collapse. Nigma also realizes that making Viper requires advanced lab techniques, and one lab capable of this is Wells-Zyn, a company owned by Wayne Enterprises. But then, their discussion is interrupted when a police officer is thrown into the room by a female Viper user who starts showing signs of her bones weakening. Meanwhile, Maroni briefly considers hiring a Viper user to attack Falcone's casino. Frankie points out that the casino security is too tight. Hearing this, Penguin offers to help, saying he knows someone who works at the casino and can get them inside. Maroni becomes curious about Penguin, realizing he's more than just a dishwasher. Penguin explains that working in a business like this isn't new to him. In the past, he worked for Fish Mooney and learned many secrets about Falcone's family business, even coming close to being killed for it. But Maroni is suspicious and doesn't fully trust him yet. The following day, Tyler Riss, the general counsel from Wells-Zyn, visits Jim at his office. She insists that Wells-Zyn has nothing to do with the recent events and will take legal action against anyone who tries to harm the company. Jim, however, is focused on learning about an employee with a damaged ear. The employee is revealed to be Stan Patalski, who worked at Wells-Zyn as a biochemist for several years. Stan became frustrated because his work wasn't important, and after an argument with his bosses, he tried to cut off his own ear. Wells-Zyn then fired him, but Stan was smart enough to set up his own lab. Soon after, the woman from Wells-Zyn invited Jim to visit their lab with permission. Moments later, Frankie came to Jim and took him to meet Maroni at his restaurant. Maroni wanted Jim to tell the same story that Penguin had told him earlier. If the stories matched, Maroney would believe Penguin. Jim then explained his investigation into the murder of the Wayne couple. He felt like he was just a pawn in a larger conspiracy involving Falcone, the mayor, and the police, who used Mario Pepper as a scapegoat, with help from Fish Mooney, Penguin's old boss. Previously, Penguin had tried to reveal everything to the Central Police, but Falcone found out. To test Jim's loyalty, Falcone ordered him to kill Penguin, but Jim didn't do it. Until now, no one knows that Penguin is still alive. Maroney was pleased, realizing that Penguin could be a powerful weapon against Falcone. Before Jim left, Maroney warned him not to tell anyone about their meeting. Meanwhile, Fish teaches Liza how to speak and act more properly. Back at the office, Jim looks through Stan's belongings and finds a photo of Stan with a philosophy professor. Jim and Harvey visit the professor, who confirms that Stan was his former student. The professor explains that Stan's research at Wells-Zyn led him down a dangerous path. Stan developed a drug called Viper, which was meant to create stronger soldiers for the military. However, the drug had serious side effects. Viper was just the first version, and Stan was planning a stronger version called Venom. Stan had asked his bosses to stop the program, but they refused. He then went to Thomas and Martha Wayne for help, but after they died, Wells-Zyn continued the project. Jim realizes that the professor is helping Stan with his plan to attack Wells-Zyn. Suddenly, the professor inhales Viper and attacks Harvey. At that time, Jim tries to get the professor to reveal where Stan is, but the professor only says that Wells-Zyn must pay for their actions so that everyone can see the truth about Wayne Enterprises. Meanwhile, Bruce arrives at the Wayne Enterprises charity event and meets with Mathis. Bruce tells her that he wants to speak with the board of directors about something suspicious in the Arkham project. Mathis assures Bruce that Wayne Enterprises wouldn't do business with bad people. At the same time, Stan prepares to release Viper gas into the charity event through the air ducts. Soon, the TV in the room shows Stan admitting that he was the one who spread Viper for Wells-Zyn, a company owned by Wayne Enterprises. As the gas begins to fill the room, Alfred quickly grabs Bruce and gets him out of the building. Meanwhile, Jim rushes to the roof to stop Stan. At that time, Stan refused to stop his actions, feeling his mission was complete. Before jumping, he told Jim to check out Wells-Zyn's warehouse number 39. When Jim arrived at the warehouse, he found it empty. Outside, Mathis was watching him and made a phone call to someone, reporting what she saw. On the other hand, Alfred, who wasn't interested at first, started helping Bruce investigate Wayne Enterprises' secret plans. Elsewhere, Penguin was nervous as he waited for Maroney's men, along with Penguin's contact, to rob Falcone's casino. When they returned with the money, Penguin felt relieved. Meanwhile, Fish was with Nikolai, and it turned out they were pretending to fight in front of Falcone. Their real plan was to overthrow him. At the end, Liza is seen walking in the park, listening to a song to catch Falcone's attention. Falcone hears the song and recognizes it from his childhood, as his mother used to sing it to him. The scene then shifts to the past, where a masked man claimed to be the spirit of the goat. Harvey and his partner found a car belonging to Randall, a man who had kidnapped a girl. They discovered the girl tied up in an abandoned building, but Randall attacked them, saying no one could stop the goat's spirit, which would always return. Suddenly, Harvey shot Randall, but sadly, his partner was injured and fell unconscious. In the present, a girl named Amanda Hastings, 21 years old and from a rich family, is found tied up. This reminds Harvey of the past case with Randall. He believes this is the work of a copycat, as the goat's spirit always targeted the firstborn children from wealthy families. Soon after, Montoya and Allen went to the pier and showed Jim's photo to a homeless man. The man confirmed that Jim was the one who shot. Meanwhile, Jim was arguing with Barbara about the dangers of his job. Barbara insisted on knowing what Jim was dealing with. Just then, Harvey called Jim to meet him. When Jim arrived, Harvey explained that the current case was similar to incidents from the past. The criminal seemed to know the victim, so they decided to visit the victim's family. The victim's father said no one would want to hurt his daughter, but Harvey noticed the man's strange hand movements. The family therapist quickly told them the father needed rest, explaining that Hastings, the victim, had a kind personality and couldn't handle the tragedy. However, Harvey suspected the therapist had given the father a sedative. Harvey believed the case had the same pattern as Randall's case from 10 years ago. Randall had worked as an air conditioner repairman in 3 buildings, giving him access. After that, they visited the doctor who had performed the autopsy. They discovered a 2 centimeters cut on the victim's head, stitched up to hide a 1-cent coin inside. Shortly after, Harvey reported this to Essen, pointing out that this detail was the same as in Randall's case. Essen wondered how anyone could know about the case since the files were hidden. Harvey suspected that the only person who would know was his former partner, Dix. Meanwhile, Nigma is curious and looking for files about the goat spirit while trying to flirt with a woman named Kringle. She doesn't care as long as Nigma doesn't mess up her neatly arranged files. The scene then shifts to Bruce watching the news about the goat's copycat. Alfred suggests Bruce take a break since he's a rich kid and could be in danger. But Bruce isn't scared, saying he's doing his job and besides, he no longer has parents to worry about. Back to Nigma. He rearranges the files, which makes Kringle upset. Nigma admits he was wrong to mess with them. Meanwhile, Jim and Harvey visit Dix, who is now paralyzed because of an old incident. They asked him about the goat spirit and Randall, the copycat who uses the same coin as the original killer. Dix confirms that he didn't tell anyone about the case, and this means Randall wasn't acting alone and they might be dealing with a conspiracy. Before they leave, Dix warns Jim to be careful of Harvey, saying he always thinks he's better than his partners. At the same time, the goat strikes again, this time targeting a woman named Ember. When Harvey finds out, he contacts Jim and explains that Randall's method takes 8 hours, which includes dressing the victim, killing her, and inserting a coin into her head. Harvey suggests Jim ask Nigma, who loves solving puzzles, to check which officers had access to Amanda and Ember's apartments. Sometime later, Jim, Harvey, and Nigma discover that the officer involved is a man named Raymond. Meanwhile, in an abandoned building, the goat is performing another ritual, but is interrupted when Jim and Harvey arrive just in time. Jim works to rescue the girl, while Harvey chases after the goat. The goat tells Harvey that no one can stop him and that he will always return. When Harvey is cornered, Jim arrives and helps to take the goat down. Afterward, Essen praises Jim and Harvey for catching the criminal. However, Harvey still feels uneasy and wonders how Raymond, who had a mental disorder, knew about Randall. Harvey is convinced that someone or something must have influenced Raymond. Suddenly, Raymond becomes agitated and clenches his fists. The following day, Barbara meets with Montoya and tells her that Jim keeps avoiding her questions and won't reveal who he's afraid of. Montoya tells Barbara that an arrest warrant has been issued for Jim. She advises Barbara to leave before Jim gets arrested. At Wayne Manor, Selena sneaks in to steal something and accidentally finds Bruce's research about all the conspiracies in Gotham. Elsewhere, Penguin returns home to his mother and tells her about someone who betrayed and hurt him. He promises that one day he will become someone important in the city. His mother is worried because she can see that Penguin is troubled, but he reassures her, saying a police officer will help him achieve his goals. Soon after, Barbara prepares to leave and warns Jim that Montoya has a witness and a warrant for his arrest. At the same time, Alan and Montoya arrive to arrest Jim for the supposed murder of Oswald Cobblepot, also known as Penguin. Meanwhile, Harvey visits Hastings' apartment again to meet with the therapist Marks. Harvey realizes that Marks is an expert in hypnotherapy. He asks her about a patient named Raymond, who shows the same strange behavior as Hastings. Harvey learns that when a patient is hypnotized with a bad idea, they can be triggered to do things like clenching their fists. Harvey suspects that Marks also hypnotized Randall in the past. Then, Harvey investigates and finds out that Marks has been running a free clinic where she selects people to commit crimes. Marks defends her actions, saying it's her way of helping Gotham, a city once full of hope but ruined by the wealthy. She believes the spirit of the goat is real and wants people to fear it. Suddenly, Marks orders Hastings to attack Harvey and then tries to escape. However, Harvey manages to stop and capture her. Later, Harvey tells Essen about what happened. Just then, Alan and Montoya arrive with Jim in custody. Jim tries to explain that he didn't kill Oswald, but this angers Harvey. However, Everyone is shocked when Oswald Cobblepot, also known as Penguin, suddenly shows up alive. Sometime later, Fish Mooney is furious when she finds out that Penguin is still alive and working with Maroni. Meanwhile, Harvey tries to take Jim to Falcone, but Jim manages to stop him. Jim then heads straight to Barbara, who is being visited by Fish Mooney's men. Luckily, Jim fights them off and takes Barbara to the station, telling her to leave for her safety. After that, Jim returns to the office as if nothing happened and prepares an arrest warrant for the mayor and Falcone. This surprises Essen, as no one has ever dared to go after them, not even her. Essen tells Jim she won't help him because she has a family to protect and asks him to leave Gotham. However, Jim refuses to leave the city. Soon, Victor Zash arrives to take Jim away on Falcone's orders. Jim believes the police will help him, but unfortunately, they all refuse. A shootout occurs, but Jim manages to escape with the help of Alan and Montoya. Meanwhile, Fish Mooney and Falcone meet to discuss the problem of Jim not completing his task. They are also concerned that Penguin, who knows many secrets, is now working for Maroni. Nikolai is angry at Falcone, thinking he isn't taking the situation seriously, and he fears Maroni might be laughing at them. This time, Fish agrees with Nikolai. After the meeting, Fish tells Nikolai they need to be patient if they want to take down Falcone, as the girl she sent hasn't completed her mission yet. After that, Fish meets with Maroni to demand the return of Penguin, accusing him of being disrespectful to Falcone. Penguin insists he never meant any disrespect. Fish isn't happy when Penguin calls her by name and slaps him. Meanwhile, Fish's men block one of Maroni's trucks, refusing to let it pass through their territory. When Maroni hears about this, he gets angry and realizes why Falcone wants Penguin so much because Penguin helps them make money. Then, Maroni decides that if Falcone pressures him, he will also put pressure on Falcone's family. The following day, Jim wakes up after being shot and decides to go to Wayne Manor with Alan and Montoya. When they arrive, Jim apologizes to Bruce for not keeping his promise to find the killer of his parents. Jim leaves the case to Alan and Montoya, asking them to continue investigating the deaths of Thomas and Martha Wayne. The next day, Penguin and Frankie go to Nikolai's business location to destroy it. Afterward, Penguin is beaten up by Frankie, who doesn't trust him and thinks he complains too much. However, two of Frankie's men defend Penguin because Penguin paid them more. After taking out Frankie, Penguin and Maroni meet with Falcone. Both of them mourn the loss of Frankie and Nikolai. Falcone says the violence needs to stop, especially since Wayne Enterprises is involved in the Arkham project again. Falcone agrees to let Penguin stay with Maroni, and in return, Maroni gives him Indian Hill, a waste disposal site in the Arkham area. In the end, they reach an agreement. Meanwhile, Jim starts preparing his weapons. Harvey, drunk, shows up and supports Jim's plan to arrest the mayor and Falcone for framing Mario Pepper. Even though it seems impossible, Jim believes it's worth trying, at least to let people know what the Mafia is doing. The next day, Jim and Harvey confront the mayor and try to get him to cooperate by taking them to Falcone's house. They try to arrest him, but Falcone threatens Jim, saying he won't leave alive. Falcone then reveals that Barbara has returned to Gotham, begging for mercy, and is now being held by Victor Zash. Hearing this, Jim surrenders. Luckily, Falcone is kind enough to let them all go, telling Jim that he's not the real enemy. Falcone wants Jim to understand this, so that one day Jim will realize Falcone was right. Afterward, Barbara apologizes to Jim, saying she only wanted to help him. Soon after, Falcone is approached by Penguin. It turns out they had planned everything from the start. Penguin had asked Falcone to have Jim pretend to execute him, knowing Jim was the only person who might spare his life. If the plan worked, Penguin would serve as Falcone's spy for the rest of his life. Penguin also reveals that Fish and Nikolai only pretended to hate each other, and Nikolai was helping Fish take Falcone's place. Penguin is thankful to Falcone for allowing both him and Jim to live. Some time later, a mysterious man watched as two masked men fought until one died. The next day, the dead man's body was found without any ID. Then, Nigma examined the body and said the time of death was midnight, but the body had only been at the scene for a few hours. They also found a finger in the victim's mouth. Meanwhile, Penguin stopped a woman and took her brooch to give to Fish Mooney, hoping it would improve their relationship. But when Fish opened the gift, she immediately stabbed Penguin's hand, feeling betrayed by someone she once considered family. Later, Penguin gave the brooch to his mother, explaining the wound as proof of his success, which made others jealous. Jim then met with the victim's mother, who said her son had been looking for a job in finance. At the same time, Harvey talked to Essen about how the police felt embarrassed around Jim. Essen admitted this, but said she wouldn't let Jim work alone. Later, Jim and Harvey visited an illegal clinic looking for someone missing a thumb. The doctor mentioned a man who came in wearing a uniform and a sash, but he also dropped a business card from Sione's investment company. Soon after, Jim arrested the doctor, but Alvarez disagreed because they had a deal with him. Harvey reminded Jim to cooperate with his colleagues and let the doctor go, but Jim refused. When Jim got home, he found Barbara holding a gun, frightened by the thought that Zash was always following her. The next day, Barbara asked Jim to leave his gun behind before heading out. Jim admits he was restless and drank too much the night before. Meanwhile, 3 men locked up are waiting for the masked man to order them to fight. At the same time, Nigma tries to do a forensic exam, but gets scolded by the doctor. On the other hand, Alfred thinks Bruce should go back to school and socialize with kids his age. Bruce reluctantly agrees, even though he feels homeschooling is enough and thinks his peers are too immature. While alone, Bruce is approached by a friend named Tommy, who starts talking about Bruce's parents' death. Bruce gets upset and ends up hitting Tommy for talking about his mother. Alfred notices something's wrong when Bruce returns and is surprised anyone would dare to disrespect the Wayne family. Alfred then takes Bruce to Tommy's house and hands him his father's watch to confront Tommy. The next day, Fish tells Liza to copy a book from Falcone's private office. To get the key, Liza gives Falcone sleeping pills. At the same time, Jim and Harvey visit Sione's office and show him a photo of a victim named Coleman Lawson, but Sione's claims he doesn't know him. Harvey finds it odd that there's so much military gear in Sione's office. Sione's explains that to succeed, one must think like a soldier. He adds that masks are used to hide faces but reveal a person's true self, as the mask always tells the truth. Jim doesn't believe him and accuses Sione's of killing Coleman Lawson. On their way out, Jim finds blood on the floor, which leads him to the restroom, where he's attacked by a man named Adams. At that time, Adams is interrogated and considered a suspect. Harvey reports to Essen that the murder was part of a recruitment process where the top 3 candidates must fight to the death. Soon after, Nigma arrives with his findings, revealing printer toner, ink, and staples in the victim's shoulder, along with pencil stubs in his ribs. A lawyer shows up to stop Adams from speaking, leaving Jim to quickly figure out where the fights are happening. On the other hand, Essen is shocked by the strange events happening in Gotham and wonders if they are connected to the deaths of Thomas and Martha Wayne. Shortly after, Jim rushes to an abandoned location and finds 3 people locked up, but he is suddenly knocked out by Sione's. Harvey tries to contact Jim, but gets no response. When he asks for help from his fellow officers, they all refuse. Frustrated, Harvey takes action, and Essen decides to support him, leading the rest of the team to help. When Jim wakes up, he finds himself facing 3 men who are ready to fight him. Sione's, speaking through a loudspeaker, announces that whoever defeats Jim will win $1 million. With no other choice, Jim has to defend himself. The fight is watched by Sione's office workers. After a tough struggle, Jim manages to defeat the 3 men. Then, Sione's himself steps in, wearing a mask and carrying a sword. Just as Jim is about to defeat Sione's, Essen arrives to stop him. After the incident, Jim thanks Harvey for supporting him. Jim makes it clear that he won't stop until he takes down the mayor, Falcone, and other corrupt people. Soon after, Jim tries to call Barbara, but there's no answer. It turns out that Barbara left a letter for him. Meanwhile, Alvarez reports that a thief has been caught who knows Jim. It turns out to be Selena. The following day, Penguin captures Timothy, one of Fish Mooney's men. Penguin used to do Timothy's job and now wants to know Fish's latest secret. Timothy reveals that Fish once mentioned someone close to Falcone, and that person is Liza, who is currently slipping sleeping pills into Falcone's tea. Later, Liza goes to Fish, saying she wants to quit, but Fish tells her a story about witnessing her mother's murder by Falcone's men when she was young. Fish says that's why she refuses to be weak. Liza feels conflicted and gives Fish a paper she had asked for, which is a threat meant to bring down Falcone. However, Fish's story about her mother is revealed to be a lie to manipulate Liza. At the end, Bruce admits that he enjoyed fighting Tommy and asks Alfred to teach him how to fight. Alfred agrees. Some time later, Jim takes Selena to Barbara's apartment and finds a letter from Barbara. In the letter, Barbara explains her anxiety and fear of Falcone and Zash, so she decides to leave for a while to calm down. Jim then takes Selena to Wayne Manor and shows her a sketch of the person believed to have shot Thomas and Martha Wayne. At first, Alfred doesn't like the idea, but Bruce decides to let Selena stay since she is the only witness who can help find his parents' killer. There, Jim asks Alfred to be patient and tells him that he plans to meet with an assistant district attorney named Two-Face. Meanwhile, a prisoner named Ian Hargrove, an expert at making explosive things, is being transferred. During the trip, armed men stop the vehicle and free Ian, who quickly hides his belongings. At Wayne Manor, Bruce is practicing boxing with Alfred. Selena watches and comments that in Gotham, people don't fight with boxing gloves. There, Alfred notices that Bruce is interested in Selena, but he warns Bruce to stay cautious around her. Elsewhere, Two-Face challenges a teenager to pick heads or tails with a coin to decide whether the teen will go to prison. The teenager picks heads and wins, but it turns out both sides of the coin were heads, so the choice was rigged. Jim then shows Two-Face a sketch of an unknown person. Two-Face suspects a billionaire named Dick Lovecraft, who has ties to Maroni, Falcone, and Wayne Enterprises. Lovecraft was Thomas Wayne's enemy. Two-Face plans to leak that they have a key witness in the case to scare the people involved. Jim agrees as long as their names are kept secret. Shortly after, Jim returns to the office and gets a case about a prisoner escape. And Ian Hargrove, who is mentally unstable and obsessed with making bombs, was helped by 4 armed men to escape during a transfer. While in prison, Ian was isolated and had only one visitor in the last 2 years, and it was his brother John. When Jim and Harvey meet John, he explains that Ian isn't a killer, though he has struggled with mental health since childhood. Ian has never hurt anyone, except for the recent bombing, which he deeply regretted. Meanwhile, after Ian finishes making another bomb, someone takes it and delivers it as a package to the Gotham Munitions factory, where it explodes. The next morning, Bruce, curious about Selena's life on the streets, asks about her parents. Selena, uncomfortable with the conversation, insists she's not an orphan. Elsewhere, Essen gets angry after the building explosion. Jim and Harvey discover that Ian and his gang have stolen a dangerous compound called HMX. Shortly after, Alfred contacts Jim because he's worried about Selena and asks Jim to come to Wayne Manor. Moments later, Penguin secretly visits Liza's place. When she returns, she notices her clothes have been taken. Curious, Penguin visits Fish and notices a perfume similar to Liza's. Later, Jim tells Harvey that Barbara has left him. At the same time, Nigma analyzes the explosive fragments and finds a nameplate from an old metal factory in Gotham. Jim and Harvey head there and find Ian Hargrove, who explains that he was kidnapped by a Russian named Kazanov to help him rob Falcone's vault. Soon after, they rush to the vault and find Ian again, but Kazanov has taken him away. Later at the police station, Jim blames the mayor for creating a mental health facility and sending prisoners there, which led to Ian being kidnapped. Harvey then discovers that Gregor Kazanov has a criminal record and used to work with Nikolai. Meanwhile, Fish meets with Kazanov and tells him that Nikolai was killed by Falcone. There, Fish convinces Kazanov to get revenge by attacking Falcone's money, which would hurt him the most. The next day, Two-Face tells Dick Lovecraft that they are preparing a lawsuit against him. Lovecraft thinks it's ridiculous and threatens Two-Face, but Two-Face reveals his darker side, leaving Lovecraft speechless. On the other hand, Bruce secretly catches Selena as she's about to leave. He asks if it's true that during the murder, she saw him just stand there while a man shot his parents. Selena replies that a gun is still a gun, and there was nothing a child like Bruce could have done. Selena then tells Bruce that her mom is a secret agent disguised as an artist. She also asks Bruce if he's ever kissed a girl. Their moment is interrupted when Alfred arrives and reminds Bruce to train. Selena is surprised by how much Bruce trains, saying that in Gotham, being strong isn't enough cause you have to be cruel too. Some time later, Nigma explains that the explosives used are very special, volatile, and hard to make, designed to penetrate metal. He also says that years ago, private investors bought an armory in Gotham that had a safe, which has now been broken into by Kazyanov with Ian Hargrove's help. Armed with this info, Jim and Harvey arrive to surround the thieves, and Jim tells Ian that his brother is safe. Suddenly, the truck carrying the money explodes. The explosion was set off by Butch, one of Fish's men, who reports to Fish that he had to blow up the truck because of the heavy police presence. Fish is happy, knowing Falcone will suffer from losing his money. At Wayne Manor, Bruce and Selena enjoy their time together, much to Alfred's relief, and even Jim is glad to see them having fun. Elsewhere, Penguin visits Liza again. He promises not to tell Falcone about her spying, as long as Liza stays with Fish and keeps the secret. Meanwhile, Two-Face meets with Jim to update him on his conversation with Dick Lovecraft. Harvey also informs Jim that Ian Hargrove has been transferred to Arkham by the mayor's orders and that the truck explosion wasn't Ian's doing. Elsewhere, the mayor announces to the people of Gotham that Arkham Asylum will be turned into a rehabilitation center for mentally ill inmates. That night, Jim leaves a voicemail for Barbara, saying how much he wishes she were with him. However, Barbara is secretly having an affair with Montoya. One day, a group of intruders sneaks into Wayne Manor. Inside, Selena questions why Bruce is so determined to investigate his parents' death. She tells him that Gotham is full of disasters and he should just accept it. Bruce responds by reminding Selena about when she asked him to kiss her, but he believes their relationship isn't romantic and even thinks Selena isn't a good person. Suddenly, a woman breaks into the house and Alfred confronts her. Realizing they are in danger, Alfred tells Bruce and Selena to run while he tries to fight off the intruders. Shortly after, Bruce and Selena run down the hall and manage to escape the house, but Bruce feels guilty about leaving Alfred behind. Despite this, he follows Selena as the intruders start chasing them. Later, Jim and Harvey arrive at Wayne Manor after getting a report. The injured Alfred tells Jim that the intruders were after Selena. Hearing this, Harvey gets angry because Jim hadn't told him that Selena was a witness to the Wayne murders. Meanwhile, Two-Face is investigating Dick Lovecraft, who leaked information about Selena's location. Alfred is also upset with Jim and demands they find Bruce right away. At that time, Jim believes Bruce is heading to Gotham and that he will be safe with Selena on the streets. On the other hand, Bruce felt the need to return home because he was worried about Alfred. He and Selena also started wondering who the intruders were really after. At Falcone's residence, Penguin confronted Falcone, who accused him of leaking the location of his money to Maroni. Penguin denied it and suggested there was a spy within Falcone's organization. Penguin questioned why Falcone allowed Fish to live, even though she had been unfaithful multiple times. Falcone replied that Fish still made him a lot of money. At that time, Penguin asked for time to find out who the spy working for Fish was. When Penguin returned home, his men asked why he didn't just tell Falcone who the spy was. Penguin explained it was only a matter of time, and that Liza was like a ticking time bomb. Later, Falcone held a meeting with his associates and shot one of them, Banyan, for not guarding the weapons warehouse properly. He warned everyone that betrayers would face the same fate and announced a 25% tax increase. The following day, Jim met with Two-Face to ask how the assassins knew Selena's location. At first, Two-Face denied leaking it, but then he remembered that during a secret interview, he had mentioned Jim's name. Two-Face admitted his mistake and advised Jim to find Lovecraft to lure the assassins. He also gave Jim one of Lovecraft's home addresses. Soon after, Harvey and Alfred question a street kid who knows Selena. At that time, Alfred easily offers money to get information about where Selena might be. The boy mentions hearing about a new fence who might know Selena's location, but only Fish knows who this person is. At the same time, Fish is talking with Butch about Falcone's anger. She asks Butch to show his support for Saviano and Tursky, who are upset about Falcone raising their taxes. When Harvey and Alfred arrive, they're greeted by Butch, who is hesitant to let them see Fish. Alfred grows impatient and threatens Butch, but Fish quickly shows up. She knows they want information about the witness used to scare Lovecraft. Although Fish initially says it's not her concern, Alfred persuades her to reveal who the fence is. In the streets of Gotham, Bruce and Selena arrive at a safe spot. Selena feels comfortable there and tells him to go home, but Bruce refuses, insisting that Selena come with him and testify. However, Selena doesn't like that idea, then climbs up to a rooftop, with Bruce following her. Determined, Bruce tries to keep up with her as they leap between buildings. Eventually, they reach a place called the Flea, a sort of marketplace for street kids. There, they encounter Ivy. After asking about the fence, Clyde, Selena suddenly urges Bruce to leave, clearly afraid of Ivy. The next day, Jim finds Lovecraft, who claims he didn't order the hitman because he's also being targeted. There, Lovecraft explains that before Bruce's parents were killed, there was suspicious activity with Wayne Enterprises stock, as if someone knew something bad was going to happen. Suddenly, the hitmen arrive, and Jim tries to fight them off, but gets knocked out. When Jim wakes up, he finds Lovecraft has been shot dead with Jim's own gun. Meanwhile, Bruce and Selena meet Clyde to hand over some stolen goods. At that time, Selena wants to leave because she's not happy with the price, but Clyde traps them in a room, planning to hand Selena over to the hitmen. Bruce and Selena search for a way out, and when one of the men enters, they hide and trick him, eventually escaping. At the same time, Harvey and Jim arrive and get caught in a shootout with the hitmen. On the other hand, Alfred rushes inside to find Bruce, who is buying time for Selena to escape. Alfred finally finds Bruce and feels relieved, joking that if something happened to Bruce, no one would hire him anymore. Later, Jim confronts the mayor, who is furious about Lovecraft's death with Jim's gun. Though the mayor still trusts Jim, he decides to cover up Lovecraft's death by making it look like a suicide to keep everyone safe. Two-Face agrees with this plan, even though Jim disagrees. In the end, the mayor announces that Lovecraft committed suicide because he couldn't handle the false accusations from the police. Moments later, at Wayne Manor, Selena suddenly returns to give back the item she had stolen from Bruce. Before leaving, she gives Bruce a kiss. Afterward, Alfred notices that Bruce seems a bit lonely now that Selena is no longer around. At the police station, Jim says goodbye to his co-workers because he has been reassigned to be a security guard at Arkham Asylum. He has to accept this new position if he wants to stay in the police force. Now working as a security guard at Arkham, Jim faces the reality of being in charge of mentally ill criminals. One day, a riot breaks out, and Jim steps in to stop the fighting prisoners. This is the fourth riot since he started working at Arkham, and Director Lank scolds Jim, saying he isn't doing his job well. Later, a young doctor named Dr. Leslie arrives to check on one of the injured prisoners. She recognizes Jim as the brave cop who stood up to the mayor in Gotham. Meanwhile, Selena finds Ivy, who is sick, and secretly brings her to Jim's apartment without him knowing. Selena enjoys the view of Gotham from the apartment balcony. Back at Arkham, Jim discovers a prisoner named Frogman with a head injury caused by dangerous electric shock therapy. This type of therapy is usually used to control bad behavior, but too much electricity has damaged Frogman's brain. At that moment, Jim wants to report the incident to the Gotham police, but Director Lank refuses and tells Jim to figure out who is responsible. Jim questions a guard named Steven about a missing key, and Steven admits he noticed it was gone after the riot started. Shortly after, Jim starts questioning the inmates, including Jack Gruber, a dangerous sociopath, who denies taking the missing key, and another inmate, Aaron, who claims he's never lied or taken the key. Meanwhile, Penguin meets with one of Maroni's business partners and secretly raises taxes without Maroni knowing. However, he gets caught and beaten up by the police. At the same time, Fish sees Saviano as a problem that needs to be handled before facing Maroni. There, Butch suggests talking to Saviano about Fish being the best leader, but Fish doubts Butch's loyalty. On the other hand, Barbara, feeling upset, tells Montoya not to be jealous of Jim since they've broken up. Montoya responds by saying Barbara made a big mistake, which leads to an argument. That night, Barbara tries to call Jim, but hears Ivy's voice on the phone, making her even angrier. Elsewhere, an inmate named Royston is tied up and given electric shocks by a mysterious person. Soon after, Jim finds Royston and gets him checked out. Jim believes the staff might be involved, but Director Lank tells him to keep focusing on the inmates. After that, Jim contacts Harvey to come to Arkham, and Harvey agrees that it looks like a case of assault. Harvey accuses Director Lank of hiding information and suggests Jim look into Jack Gruber. At the police station, Dr. Lank mentions that electroshock therapy is unethical and should only be done by skilled doctors, but Arkham doesn't have such doctors. Harvey remains suspicious of the staff, thinking they might be involved. While investigating, Jim checks the blueprints and finds a hidden office in the basement of Arkham. At that time, Dorothy claims the room is closed because of dangerous chemicals. When they go to check, Dr. Leslie arrives and Dorothy pushes her and runs away. Shortly after, Harvey calls Jim to inform him that Dorothy is actually a prisoner. Dorothy opens the restricted area, freeing many inmates, but Jack Gruber stays in his cell. As Dorothy tries to escape with the other prisoners, she trips and gets trampled. Meanwhile, Jim and Leslie manage to escape from the chaos caused by the freed inmates. After that, Jim reported the incident to Essen, and forensics started searching the basement to find where Dorothy had been staying. Both Essen and Harvey were happy with Jim's work and offered him his old position back. Forensics later found electrode marks on Dorothy's head, just like the other victims, showing that Dorothy was also a victim. Surprisingly, the real criminal was Jack Gruber, who had been controlling the inmates. When Jim and Harvey returned to Arkham, they found Dr. Lank unconscious with a letter from Jack Gruber saying he had escaped and trained the inmates' skills. Meanwhile, Maroni visits Penguin, telling him he was the one who got Penguin arrested. Maroni thinks Penguin was being arrogant for raising taxes without telling him. But then, Penguin apologizes, and Maroni lets him go. At the end of the story, Butch meets with Saviano and recalls stealing meat when he was a kid. Butch apologizes for betraying Saviano, and when he accepts the apology, Butch suddenly shoots him. This shocking moment wraps up the first season of Gotham. The moral lesson from this series is if you want to survive in Gotham, always keep a spare key and never trust someone who steals meat. Oh, and maybe avoid electric shock therapy too, unless you want your hair permanently frizzy.